May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord. I love that moment, and I've had it a few times in my life, when having taken off from the runway, holiday bound, you start the ascent to cruising altitude in the daytime gloom, and then all of a sudden the aircraft penetrates the cloud and breaks through into the expansive skyscape of dazzling sunshine. It never ceases to amaze me that the sun was there, shining all the time, just obscured by a thick layer of cloud. And in that moment, you can see it all. Some pretty special sky moments occur in our readings this morning. Phenomenal occasions when things are revealed and made apparent. Firstly, in Genesis, we have the account of the rainbow's debut, like a piece of celestial Banksy appearing in the sky, as God signs covenant to never again destroy all life by flood. And secondly, in that highly charged moment in our Gospel reading, when Jesus emerges from the waters of baptism, and Mark describes how the heavens were torn apart, the boundary between heaven and earth disappearing as God reveals himself as Trinity. The anointing Spirit descending dove-like on Christ, the Father audibly affirming his love and delight in the Son as he starts his ministry. What extraordinary occasions of complete wonder and revelation when God drew close and made himself known in love. But we as humans know this much about life, that it's made up of highs and lows and everything in between. Those times in our faith journey when we are blessed with a strong sense of affirmation and encouragement are inevitably followed by days when cloud is present, like the impenetrable layer I mentioned earlier, and we are left to make our way, seeing only with the eyes of faith. And the same was true for Christ. Hard upon the glory of his baptism, Mark tells how the Spirit immediately drove Jesus into the wilderness for a time of testing. It's a strong verb, drove, carrying a sense of purposeful sending. And Jesus now submits to a 40-day intense trial, a period which references the 40 years the children of Israel wandered in the desert after their exodus from Egypt. Yet whilst they grumbled and rebelled and failed when tempted, Mark presents a Messiah who yields to the process and the will of God and stands firm, trusting in his Father's care through trial, not just blessing. Far from the joy and elation of his baptism, the wild and hostile barrenness of the Jordanian desert becomes the setting for his temptation, where everything is stripped away and the core motivations of his heart are tested. Time alone with God to settle who he was at his centre and discern the nature of his ministry and what sort of Messiah he was to be as he emerged from that desert place. The desert, in whatever capacity we experience it, and we can argue lockdown is a form of desert, is an arid, lonely place. Everything inside of us naturally recoils at its starkness as we long for more mellow, carefree, untroubled times. But if we allow it, by trusting in God's care, we can discover there a whole new sense of identity and purpose, and in the absence of the usual distractions, develop a renewed hunger to know only God. On this, the first Sunday in Lent, may we take from these passages the assurance that God is faithful. He keeps covenant as embodied in the rainbow. May we hear again his voice of love as he affirms and delights in us. We are his chosen and beloved ones, and through Christ we have access to a new covenant of grace as barriers are removed. Indeed, the same verb that described the heavens being torn apart at Christ's baptism is used once again later in the Gospel to describe how the temple curtain, which set apart the most holy place where God dwelt, was torn in two at the moment of Christ's atoning death. The way has been made open for us as we are welcomed into God's presence. This truth is the bedrock of our faith, and it keeps us steadfast and fortified through trial. Those challenging, testing times that come to us all when we may not be able to tangibly feel God's presence, when we're forced to dig deep in our faith just to stick the course. These too are the times which have a vital part in forming us into mature disciples, the kind who've settled issues about what it means to live for the concerns of God and his kingdom. But the one we're following is with us. In his humanity, he knows the full range of human experience and can identify with us and give us grace. After his baptism and temptation ordeal, Jesus, our champion, emerged from the wilderness unified in heart and purpose and empowered to share the good news of the kingdom. Will we wait and seek God this Lent and allow the Spirit's light to shine in the secret places of our hearts, to hear him call us by name, that we may perceive who we are in the core of our being as his uniquely created child? As we embrace this transformative, purposeful work of God, I wonder, with no small sense of anticipation, what kind of people, what kind of church will we be as we emerge from our Lenten lockdown wilderness?